Hey guys. Okay, it is the next day since our VLOGMAS episode where I'm showing you the bread. So later on, I'm going to show you the final steps of the bread, which is baking it. But right now, we're actually here in the garage. So I have spent the morning working on the Holistic HA Practitioner Certification, writing the stress modules. So like concepts about stress are on my mind. So I have chosen a question from an email that a listener wrote in named Sophie, a question about her. And then I have some other questions that I might answer a few others as well. We'll see how we go because I'm actually really tired. I'm gonna bring my post-lunch coffee and let's dive in. By the way, we're in the garage because I'm filming some DIY videos too. I'm still undecided if I'm gonna do a separate YouTube channel for DIY projects or if I'm gonna do one at all, or if I'm going to keep it all here because it's like, if this was the Danny Sheriff channel, it would be all the things that I do. So I don't know, if you care or have an idea or a preference, tell me, tell me below what I should do, because I don't know. Okay, Sophie. Hi, Danny. First off, thank you for all your videos and podcasts. They've been so helpful, and apologies if what I'm asking has been answered somewhere already. Don't apologize. I have so much content now that probably need to just start answering the same questions again anyways. I was wondering if insomnia can prevent HA recovery. I feel like I've been doing everything else right, resting, eating, increased body fat percentage to normal range, etc. But for the past month, I have really struggled to sleep. Some nights I only manage 4 hours. I have a good bedtime routine, but I have gotten stuck in this loop after a break-in and increased stress. My last blood test showed much better numbers than before. Finally normal range, FSH and LH and prolactin, low end of normal estrogen, but increased. But still no period, and I haven't been able to track basal body temperature because I haven't been sleeping for 5 hours consecutively. Yeah, damn. I also know it could just be a waiting game since I didn't have my period for 4 years. I was on the birth control pill and I didn't realize. So my body has a long way to build back from and construct a proper uterine lining. Sophie, I feel like you've been listening to me for a while. You can just tell when people have, because they'll like answer your questions for you and they'll bring up the points that, I also feel like are most important. So I love it. Taught from school, the University of Danny. Okay, insomnia. So it's often with many of these things, it's like a chicken or the egg thing. Are you stressed and so you're not sleeping, or are you not sleeping? Wait, are you stressed because you're not sleeping, or are you not sleeping and is that making you stressed? And that conundrum makes a whole lot of sense. That is something that would be worth looking into. So I would figure out, like, okay, first of all, when you're not sleeping, what are you doing and thinking about? Are you ruminating on specific issues? Or are you literally just like staring at the ceiling, nothing stressing you out, you just can't fall asleep? Because there's clues there. So if it is the former and there's an issue on your mind, it's probably more stress causing trouble with sleeping. Not necessarily, but it could be. And then if you feel like everything's fine, I'm super bored, I'm just not falling asleep, then there is probably something going on hormonally with you too. It could absolutely have something to do with being in recovery and having these changes going on in your hormonal profile, essentially. But it could also be more, when we're not sleeping, when it's food related. Okay, so you mentioned here, I have been resting and increasing food and have increased my body fat percentage to a normal range, etc. I'm gonna obviously take your word on all of those things, but I'm always, with everyone, gonna to say, okay, well, from what weight to what weight has it increased? What do you think is a normal body weight BMI? And when you say in a normal range BMI, is that a possible indicator that you feel like, so I shouldn't have to gain any more weight because like this is a normal quote unquote BMI for me? Because if any of those are playing a role in why you feel like this isn't working, that might be a part of the issue. So when we're hungry, we see this in the fasting research, right? That when we're hungry, sleep suffers. We have this in human trials, we have this in rat studies, that when we are sleep deprived, we, especially in women, in female rats, they saw this, experience a higher level of alertness and more nighttime activity, which is super interesting. When we're not in starvation, when we're not fasting, that goes away. So possibly blood sugar is not being balanced, possibly overall calories are still too low. So I would suggest that based on the research that you look into that. I know you're actually a member of this society, so send me a message or reply to the email and let's talk about it. Tell me a little bit about more stats. Height, weight, how long did it take you to get to that weight? What stories, if any, do you maybe have around that weight? As in, and I shouldn't have to gain X amount because I'm pretty sure it's enough because I believe this, that, and the other. Like, give it all to me. I think it's really, really helpful. This is where like a little bit of coaching is going to come into play, probably, just to really get to the bottom of this. Now, if we discover that you are just checking every box, there's no challenges here whatsoever, you're not still a little bit hungry, or your blood sugar is not still out of whack, meaning you may want to introduce more carbohydrates or something like that. If we are finding that you're just checking all the boxes, it could be worth going to the doctor. I don't know how long you've been struggling with the sleep, but getting a sleep study done, things like that, just to see if it's not related to your HA recovery. If you feel really strongly like this symptom is happening with your HA recovery and it just is totally linked, I would give it more time. I would increase food a little bit as an experiment, as a minimum. Look, I know you feel like you've already done a lot of those changes. It can't hurt as an experiment to see what happens for a few nights if you increase food intake closer to bedtime. And it's interesting, right? Because we also have research says you shouldn't eat closer to bedtime because of yada yada and blah blah blah. But we see in practice it helps with sleep outcomes. So everybody's different, and it can be really helpful for you to experiment with yourself. See what happens when you tweak something instead of just like getting to a certain point and being like, okay, well, I'm not willing to experiment with anything else because I'm scared, you know? I hope that helped. I feel like these two questions are similar and they both came in yesterday, so I'm gonna knock them out. The first one is from Julia. Hi, I've been listening to your podcast for a while now and it did help me a lot in my recovery process, but I'm still in progress. So thank you so much for that. I don't know where to ask the listener questions, so I'm doing it here. I have been having signs of recovery for 6 to 8 months now, lots of mucus, breast tenderness, and acne. And after a progesterone test that I did in mid-September that did lead to a week of bleeding, I am experiencing every 2 weeks approximately some spotting that lasts for several days each time. I do not know if it's a good sign. Maybe these questions are different. The next question is from Marion. Hey, I've had a recovery period this month after having one last month with progesterone challenge. Last month I experienced some cervical mucus, but this month not a lot. I did an ovulation test and they're all negative. I feel so sad that my body isn't working again. I had so much hope with this real period coming, but I must admit I didn't ovulate. What can I do to help that? I'm trying to have a baby and it feels so difficult. I know. When your body's just like, you're not allowed to have a baby. You know, you're just like, hey, listen, you know, I make the rules. But saying that, telling our body, hey, listen, I make the rules, that's what got us here in the first place. So let us take a step back and reframe a little bit here. Your body isn't, when you say I'm sad that my body isn't working again, it is working. It's doing what it can with what it's got in the capacity it can. We think of our body, think of your body as you're the boss, for example, maybe you're the CEO, right? You make the decisions about what the company's doing, but in this company, the workers do not care, right? They're like, look, lady, I know that these are the goals you have, but like, I have a vacation next week. I only do 2 meetings a day. I have a whole bunch of boundaries and I'm just not budging them for you. I don't even care if you're my boss. You know why? Because you can't fire them. So they actually call the shots, even though you're the one making the decisions. So it's time to kind of shift here and be like, okay, well, what does my body really, really need? Marion, you don't share about any of the things that you've already tried naturally. You kind of just share about your progesterone challenge and some symptoms that you've been seeing. So in short, for you, it sounds like, you know, there's more work to be done with weight gain and just getting comfortable with your relationship with food and with your body and this feeling of controlling your body. Maybe binge absolutely every podcast and YouTube video that we've ever done. Just, if you haven't done that, go and start from like episode 1 and just work your way up and just sort of start to uncover what's going on here for you to have that baby. It's going to be best for you. And then for Julia, okay, so you have been at doing the recovery things. You've been having signs for 6 to 8 months. Okay, but not quite getting across the line, and you did pass a progesterone challenge. So here's what we know. We know that you are producing some levels of estrogen, and we know that that can be done without experiencing a period, right? You can have low estrogen or even normal range estrogen and not have a period. So it's not super, I keep getting covered in sawdust. It's not super surprising that you might have signs of estrogen and not be getting your cycle back. Okay, we really all need to, this is again where we come up against a boundary where we're like, okay, I'm seeing signs of recovery, and so this must be all I need to do. And so now what's happening when it's not working? And that is an interesting place to be. It's where you need to push even further. We see this all the time. You know, I actually sometimes feel that people who get their period back quickly but struggle to optimize it or struggle to conceive, maybe, which is like the same thing, I guess, that we see that a lot where it came back quickly because they get really stuck on this thought, this idea that like, well, I got my period back doing these behaviors, so these behaviors can't be the problem, right? But we can be doing enough to elicit hormonal activity, including estrogen, or including getting a menstrual cycle, but without them being in optimal ranges. So this sounds like where you're at, Julia, that there are some things going on, right? That you've made some huge changes, and in 6 to 8 months, your body was like, hell yeah, this is super great. You even started to develop a uterine lining, which is why you passed the progesterone challenge. But if there's still something holding you back and you're experiencing a little bit of spotting, I would say that yes, it's a good sign, 100%. And B, you've been experiencing this for every 2 weeks since September. It's December. It's been a long time. I get some blood work done. I check on my reproductive hormones. I do a review of my eating, right? Are you telling yourself a story that you're eating enough, but actually there's a bunch of stuff you're restricting? I check on my caffeine intake. I think that's an interesting one, possibly caffeine and or alcohol, like stimulants, things like that. If you're spotting, it could be it could be a few things, right? Not enough estrogen, right, to produce a uterine lining. It's coming up. So look at that. Get those tests, just see how they're going. But regardless really of that results of that test, I would maybe do like the period recovery game plan or checklist. Just maybe go through that and see what you are and are not doing, and just make those adjustments. Things that come to mind are like, okay, my meals are more like 500 calories each, and they're not really like 700 calories per meal, which is probably a really good place to be. Little tiny things like that could be the issue. So yeah, testing and stripping it back to basics, guys. When things get more complicated looking, when it starts to look like, hey, I've been doing this for a really long time, I'm seeing these symptoms, I think I'm really close, and you want to start thinking like, this might be more complex than I thought, how can I look into this, yada yada, bring it back to basics. Review from the beginning, what are you doing? Because your first version of going into recovery actually might look really different to your second version. Your first version might have looked like, okay, I'm gonna like introduce these fear foods and I'm gonna back off exercise, yada yada. And your second version might be like, okay, I'm gonna introduce more fear foods. Now I've introduced fear foods, but now I'm also gonna work on the fear I have around portion control. Little things like that. So we bring it back to basics, like we're starting again, and we see if that helps. Very, very rarely do we see someone experiencing something, quote unquote abnormal, like period spotting and that kind of thing, and not have going back to the basics actually be the issue, actually be the resolution. It's usually what works. Okay, I hope this was helpful, guys. Happy Vlogmas. I will see you guys tomorrow and on Sunday and on Monday. Everyone have a good day. Okay, y'all. We are now going to bake the bread. So bread has been in the fridge overnight in the Benetton basket, like I showed you guys last week. Not last week, yesterday. And I've got this piece of parchment paper. So obviously this is used parchment paper, because in case you didn't know, you can reuse your parchment paper. The box says like up to 3 uses. So I like that it's not super wasteful. So just so you know, you can keep that. As you can see, it came out really easily of the basket, and it's kind of created this pattern, this like spiral pattern. There's a little bit of rice flour on top, and I'm taking a knife and I'm slicing some bits. Sometimes I forget to do this and it still works out, but we slice it just to help it kind of rise without breaking. And it's, like having those like rip marks in them. Now the oven is ready. So I'm going to take out my pot. So the pot is like mine's a cast iron. You can use any kind of like oven safe casserole dish. So I put it in while the oven is already preheating so that it gets nice and hot. I think this is like a really important pro tip to help it bake evenly and in the time frame. And then I transfer it into the bowl. I'm moving it a little because I didn't put it quite center, but as you can see, it holds together. Even though this one, my starter wasn't in the best condition, so it didn't rise that well. It didn't stay in its form as well as I would like, but it's still holding together and it's still gonna turn out great. So I put it back in the oven with the lid on, and I'm gonna set a timer for 20 minutes. Now that it's been 20 minutes, I just take the lid off and close the oven again. You can see it's kind of risen. Oh, you probably can't tell, but I can tell. It's risen a little bit. So now I'm going to set my grimy, dirty oven, for 35 minutes. And that's the rest of it. Look, oh, there it is. It looked so pretty. It's perfect every single time. You can see it has risen, and I'm going to show you a little, this is a different loaf from the other day. This one, kind of the same thing with the dough. It didn't rise as much because the yeast wasn't as good, but it's still good. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and like the video. And if you want to submit a question for Vlogmas, do so on Instagram or email me, Danny@VHAsociety.com, or comment below.